So you're just getting started in software testing, right? Well, there are 7 key principles you absolutely need to know. And these aren't just some rules on a piece of paper. They are the fundamental mindset that's going to make you a truly effective tester. Let's break them down. All right, so here's the game plan for the next few minutes. We're going to dive into why these principles even matter. We'll face some of the harsh realities every single tester runs into. We'll learn how to test smarter, not harder, understand why context is everything, and finally, turn all this theory into practical tips you can use right away. Okay, so why are we even starting with principles? Because they're basically the strategic backbone of professional testing. They guide your decisions, they help you prioritize your work, and they help you manage expectations, both for yourself and for your whole team. And it all kicks off with one big question. I want you to really think about this for a second. Can you ever be 100% certain that a program is perfect, that it has 0 bugs? This question takes us right to the core truths of our job. In that question, it leads us straight into what I like to call the brutal truths of testing. These first 2 principles are so critical because they set realistic expectations for what you can and, more importantly, what you can't achieve with testing. So, the short answer to that big question is no. Nope. We can never, ever prove a program is completely bug-free. The goal of testing is to find bugs and reduce the chances that more are hiding in the software. But just because you didn't find any bugs, doesn't mean there aren't any. Here's a perfect real-world example. Imagine you've squashed 10 bugs. The app feels solid and it gets released. But then, bam, a user tries to log in on some old, unsupported browser and it crashes. Your testing was valuable, for sure, but it couldn't prove the absence of all potential issues. And that brings us to our second hard truth. It is physically impossible to test every single combination of inputs and conditions. The number of possible scenarios is just way too big for anything but the most basic, trivial apps. And look, this isn't just me saying this. The official board for software testing certification, the ISTQB, basically says that trying to test everything is a fool's errand. It's a direct path to failure. So what does that actually look like? To really wrap your head around this, just picture an app with only 15 filters, and each of those has 20 different parameters. Just to check the filtering functionality, you're looking at 300 test cases. 300! And that's before we even touch anything else in the app. It's just not practical. Okay, so if we can't test everything, how do we actually get our jobs done effectively? Well, that's where the next 3 principles come in. This is all about strategy and efficiency. It's all about working smarter, not harder. This one right here is a project manager's best friend. The earlier you start testing, ideally right from the requirements gathering phase, the cheaper and easier it is to fix problems. Finding a flaw in a design document is infinitely better than finding it after the code has been written and deployed. But just how much more expensive are we talking about here? The difference isn't just big. It's exponential. Check this out. This is the classic Bohm's curve, and it tells the whole story. A bug you catch in the requirements phase might cost, say, $1 to fix. That exact same bug, if a customer finds it after release, we could be talking hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars. So the key takeaway? Test early, test often. All right, next up is this idea that bugs, they like to hang out together. They don't spread out evenly across an application. They tend to cluster in certain modules or areas of the code. This is a perfect example of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. A small chunk of your modules, let's say 20%, is often where you'll find 80% of the bugs. If you notice that the authorization module is constantly causing problems, then you know to focus your regression testing efforts there after any changes are made. Now, this principle has a fantastic name, the pesticide paradox, and it's a great analogy. Just like insects in a field can become resistant to the same pesticide used over and over, your test suite gets less effective if you just run the exact same checks again and again. They'll keep catching the old bugs, but they'll become blind to new ones. So how do you fight back against this? You gotta mix things up. We have to constantly review and update our tests, use new and different test data, and even rotate testers between different modules to bring a fresh pair of eyes to the problem. Okay, let's get to our final set of principles. These are all about the big picture because, testing doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Think about it. The way you test an e-commerce website is going to be totally different from how you'd test, say, life or death medical software or a fast-paced video game. Your strategy has to adapt to the product, the risks, the team, and the business goals. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. And that brings us to our final and maybe the most important principle of all. Just because your product is technically bug-free doesn't mean it's the right product. You can build a flawless system that completely fails to meet the user's needs.
This example just hits it home perfectly. Imagine a beautifully coded e-commerce store. It's fast, it's secure, zero bugs. But it was built for a country where nobody uses credit cards online, and it's missing the one local payment method everyone uses. The software is perfect, but the product is a total failure because it doesn't actually solve the user's problem. Okay, we've gone through all 7 core principles. So let's bring it all home with some practical, real-world advice you can start using like tomorrow. So here's what you really need to lock in. For interviews or your first gig, definitely know the pesticide paradox. Always, always push for early testing by reviewing requirements. Ruthlessly prioritize, because you can't test everything. Use your knowledge of defect clustering to focus your efforts. And finally, accept that some bugs are going to slip through to production. It's just part of the job. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Which one of these principles have you already seen in action, maybe at work or even in school? Really thinking about that is the first step to truly mastering the mindset of a pro tester.